So now we've got databases connected. Hopefully we can actually look at some sample code. I'm going to walk you through the code that's in the Chapter 14 example program. So we've already looked a little bit at the connection stuff. And again, so we've got our database set up. We've got the pubs database set up in our SQL Server here. We've got a connection string set up in our web config file. So we've got a connection string here, and we'll be using that. And we've run the connection test. And so, like we did before, we can connect to the pubs database, and we know that connection's working. So let's now look at some of the sample programs. The first one we want to look at is the author browser example. So this shows how to fill a list box here with information from the author table, and then when we select that author, display some information. So let's look at the code behind this. So let's look at the code again behind this. The program starts, or the page loads. We have a page load event, and if it's the first time the page loads, we fill the author list. And so let's look at how that works. So that's going to, first it clears the author list on the page. This list box is called LST author, so we're going to clear that, and then we're going to start filling it with data. And again, we're going to do this manually or in code. Later on, the next unit will look at binding these dynamically to these objects, but we're going to first do this all in code. So we're going to create an SQL statement. We're going to select the author's last name and first name and author ID from the author's table. And again, you'd have to look at the database. We can go into the SQL Explorer and see what the data structure is and make sure we've got all these field names correct and the table name correct. So we're just selecting 3 fields from the author table and using the author table. Now we're going to grab our connection string, and the connection string is initialized up here using the web config manager. So that's being pulled from the web config file, grabbing the pubs connection string. So we'll grab that, and then once we have that connection, we've looked at this so far, creating a connection. Now we're also going to add a command. We're going to use our SQL select statement and our connection. So we're going to, command is a way of specifying I want to run this SQL on this connection. So down here, we open our connection first. Again, we're entering a try block because we'll be having to catch some exceptions here. We're going to open our connection. So here's that connection we declared up here. We're opening that up. And now we're going to execute this command. So we created this command, which is this select statement, which grabs certain fields from a certain table. And we're going to execute that with what is called a reader. Execute reader will just grab that data and bring it here in read-only format. And so that results in a reader, so we create what's called an SQL data reader. This is an object that we can use to read data from an SQL query, a select query. Not update, just read the data in a format. So that's our reader. So this reader will be filled with the data from this query. So now we'll go line by line through that reader. Or record by record, I guess, not line by line. So we'll go reader.read and read each record in that. And so we can put that in a while statement. And using that reader, we can access the different fields for that record. So when we say read, the reader will be set to a single record in the table. Let me jump to the table so we can look at it real quick. I'm going to go View, SQL Server, go down to the pubs database. Again, we're in the author table, and I'm going to right click and say View Data. So here are my records, and so we'll be looking, when we do read, we grab basically one record here, and then once we have that record, we can grab the author ID, which would be this, or the author's last name, or author's first name, or in the fields. Now in our query, we're only grabbing these first 3 fields, so we can only have access to those. Okay, sorry, my phone rang real quick. So now back here, yes. So we've got a record here in our database. So let's go back here to our view. So in our database, we can use our reader to grab just the author's last name, our first name, or the author ID. The author ID is a number, so we can convert that to string. So we are adding new items. So we're creating a new list item here. And the text is going to be just the author's last name, comma, first name. And its value is going to be author ID. And this will be important later on. So the author ID is being stored in a value. So remember, every list has the text that's displayed. And then when you choose that text, you can either grab that text or an underlying value for that text. And then we're adding this to the author. So if we look at the page, the LST author is this list. So we're doing lst.author.items.add, and we're adding this new item. So again, we're creating a new item for our list, and then we're adding it to the list items here. So we loop through every author that's returned from our reader. So everything is returned from this SQL command. And then we are going to close the reader up. So here, this opened up the reader when we did execute reader, and now we're going to close the reader. We do some error checking in case we have problems, exceptions. And then finally, when we're done with the whole thing, we're going to close the connection. So we have to close both the reader, which opened up with execute reader, and then the connection, which we opened up here. And we want to close the connection in all cases, so that's why you stick it down here in the finally block. So that's what fill authors called when we first run this. So let's just run this and see. So we'll see that this list box is populated with the first name, comma, last name, comma, first name of all of our authors here. So all that information is populated in here. And underneath the text here is the value for each one. And so now the next thing we're going to look at is when I select an author, we're going to display that author's information over here. So let's look at what that is. So going back to our form, we have a label called LBL results, and it's set to a multi-lined label. And so let's look at how that's filled. So that's going to be filled when we change this, when this the index is changed, a select index change event on list author. So let's walk through how that works. In a similar fashion, we're going to create an SQL command. So here we're going to create an SQL command as a string, select star from authors. So we're going to grab all the fields this time from the authors table because we were displaying most of them. And then we add a where clause where the author ID is equal to, and then we're grabbing the lst.selectedItems.value here. So let's walk through what this select statement actually is going to look like. Here's what the select statement like we actually want. Let's say we want to grab an author, like let's say Cheryl Carson, and so we have the author ID is 238957766. So what we want to do is execute a statement like this. Select star from the authors table, so select all the fields from the author table, where the author ID, that's the author ID field, is equal to that value, and that's a string, even though it's all numeric, it has dashes, so it's a string, and so we put it in single quotes. So that's the statement we wanted, the SQL statement we want. So we're going to put it all in quotes here, but where this number is, we want to grab the author, the value from the list box. So we're going to take this first part here up to the single quote and put that all in double quotes. So here's the first part and double quotes around it. And then we're going to concatenate, add that, and then this. So we've done all this. Now we're going to grab the actual author ID number. And there we're going to grab that part from the actual list box. So we're going to go listbox.selectitem.value, because if you remember correctly, we stuck the author ID in as the value when we created that list box. The last name, first name were the text, and the author ID was set as the value. And then we still have this last little single quote here. So we have to also concatenate and put that single quote within double quotes. So that creates our whole select statement that we want. The book actually breaks that up into two assignment statements. We say SQL, select SQL equals, and we have that first part, and then we then concatenate this last part. So they actually break it up into two assignment statements. Although you could equally just break that up into one long assignment statement like this, if you were to want to. But the book wraps it into two statements. So that's what this does, is create that SQL statement for us, our select star from authors, where the author ID equals what was selected from the list box. Now we're going to do like before. We're going to create a connection and a command. So the connection's going to use our connection string, and once we have that, we can create our command, and that'll tie our string, our SQL string, to our connection, and then we'll be able to run this SQL string on that connection. And again, we're also going to grab a reader. We're just reading the data, so we can continue to use SQL data reader here. Okay, now we can enter our try block. We open our connection and we execute our command. So our command.execute. This will run that SQL command against that connection we have and store the resulting values back into our reader. So to see how this works, what data is actually going to be in the reader, we can actually quickly go into our SQL object, go to our pubs database. I can create a new query. I can grab this sample query we created and paste it in here and execute that query. So select star from author, where author ID is this, and it should give me one record and one record only, Sarah Carlson's record here, and it should be grabbing all the fields from her area. Okay, so that's what we're reading in. Let's get back here. So when we do this execute reader, that executes that SQL command against our database, and the reader will have that. And in this case, it only has one record in it, hopefully. And again, where before we did number of reads because we were turned to number of records, now we just have one. So we're just going to actually do one read, and then we're going to start grabbing the author's name, last name, first name, phone number. And we're going to format this all in our text box. So we're going to add this all to our label. So we have our LBL results. Remember, we want this in this LBL results area. We're going to put this here, and it's a complicated string. So the textbook uses what's called a string builder, which lets us append things to the string. We could just do a whole bunch of concatenations like we've done before, where we just set the string equal to something and add on. But here we're using the string builder. It just makes it a little easier to append and do these complicated creations of one long string. So with a string builder, you just declare a string builder, and then you can append things onto that string. So if the string builder is confusing you and you haven't used string builder, here's just another example. Here, like I say, we could just create a string, declare a string object, and manually put everything together. We could say name colon, and then grab the first name from the reader and the last name from the reader, and then also add in a phone colon and grab the phone field from the reader. So if we do this, then we can just save this results as the text for this result thing. And if I run this, let's just see how that works. I lose some of my, I haven't worked on the formatting or stuff, but you can see the basics. So it's got the person's first name, the author's first name. Well, first it says name, colon, and then the author's first name, and the author's last name, and then the word phone, colon, and then the actual phone number from the records. And again, so I have to be careful with all my spacing, and I actually want to put some blank lines in here and format this with HTML. And so that's why they're using this rather than using this these commands here. They are using the string builder because that lets them again append all these things on. They can put certain things in bold, and this BR will do a break. This BR backslash is a break, a new line in HTML, so they can put all this stuff in on new lines. So again, from the reader, from the field, we're grabbing the. Again, I can go back to my query. I've got author ID, last name, first name, phone number, address, city, state, zip, and contract. And I'm displaying a lot of that city, state, address, phone, all that information is being displayed from that one record I have. Then I close the reader, and then I close the connection here. So again, when I run this on page load, it populates this control, and then I can select one of my records. It then will grab the ID, the author ID from here, create a new SQL statement, go out to my database, grab the fields here, and then format here, and the first name and last name are put in bold, and then I have my nice line fields in here with my breaks. And then if I select another one, again, I grab the ID again, create a new SQL statement, the SQL statements run back there. Okay, that wraps up this next one. Now we'll look at the editing data on a form.